said Mrs. Craven. "I would like to address the assembly." A hush fell over the schoolhouse. Every face was alive with polite curiosity. James and Felicity Hobson, who'd been halfway to the door, retraced their steps and sank soundlessly onto their folding chairs. Mr. Barlow unfolded the chair he'd just folded and sat on it. Grant Tavistock resumed his seat somewhat awkwardly, having already threaded one arm through the sleeve of his rain jacket. Bree Pym, who was crawling after Bess with a menacing growl, ceased growling instantly and sat back on her heels, looking for all the world like a startled meerkat. Unable to arrest her forward momentum, Bess toddled unsteadily into Mr. Barlow's knees. He picked her up, placed her on his lap, and gave her his keyring to play with. The jangling noise sounded unnaturally loud in the suddenly silent schoolhouse. Peggy Taxman stared at Mrs. Craven wordlessly, which was in itself a rare event. Peggy was seldom at a loss for words, and her comments were usually delivered at a decibel level that could shatter granite. "Please forgive me, Madam Chairwoman," Mrs. Craven added. "I intended to introduce my proposal under other business, but I'm afraid you brought the gavel down before I could speak." "As usual," said Dick Peacock in a carrying undertone. "It's quite all right, Mrs. Craven," Peggy boomed, ignoring Dick. If anyone else had attempted to extend a meeting Peggy had adjourned, she would have ignored them as well. But even she had a soft spot for Mrs. Craven. She gave the gavel an authoritative bang and bellowed, "The meeting has been reconvened so that Mrs. Craven can tell us about her, proposal." "You're very kind." Mrs. Craven inclined her head respectfully to the chairwoman, then turned to face the room. "My dear friends and neighbors," she began, "a project has been languishing in my attic ever since I moved into Bluebell Cottage. I doubt that I shall live long enough to complete it by myself." Cries of "Don't be silly" and "Chin up, old girl" rang out until Peggy brought her gavel down again. "What sort of project is it?" Peggy roared. "It's a quilt," Mrs. Craven replied. "A rather large quilt." A murmur of comprehension rippled through the schoolhouse. None of us could conceive of Mrs. Craven having anything other than a quilt in her attic. "I pieced the top together many years ago," Mrs. Craven explained. "I have the backing fabric and the batting material, but I need help to do the actual quilting." "A quilting bee!" Elspeth Binney exclaimed delightedly. "You're proposing a quilting bee!" "I am," said Mrs. Craven, smiling. "In the past, quilting bees were a way for rural women to socialize while performing a useful task. While they sewed, they shared joys and sorrows, exchanged news and recipes, and supported one another in times of trouble." "You're not in trouble, are you, Mrs. Craven?" asked Mr. Barlow. "If I am, it's the universal trouble of having too much to do and too few hours in the day to do it," Mrs. Craven replied. "I would dearly love to finish my quilt before I run out of time." "I think it's a lovely idea," said Selina Buxton. "I can't imagine why we haven't done it before." "I've given some of you private quilting lessons," said Mrs. Craven, nodding to the handmaidens, "so you can get started straight away." "What about the rest of us?" asked Felicity Hobson. "If you know how to do a running stitch," Mrs. Craven told her, "you won't have any trouble learning how to quilt. And if you don't know how to do a running stitch, I can teach you." "I can do a running stitch," Christine Peacock allowed, "but my stitches aren't as neat as yours." "No matter," said Mrs. Craven. "We don't want our quilt to look machine-made, do we? Uneven stitches give a quilt character. They prove that it was made by a human being." "Then you must be a robot, Mrs. Craven," said Charles Bellingham, "because I've never seen an uneven stitch in your quilts." Mrs. Craven waved away the compliment. "I've had a lot of practice, Charles, but I'm still capable of producing some very crooked lines indeed. If I unpicked every wobbly stitch I sewed, I'd still be working on my first quilt.